Welcome to Impact Farming, where we introduce you to the people and ideas that will have a massive impact on your farming operation. Brought to you by Farm Marketer. Sit down, start the engine, and let's roll with today's show.
This week's episode is brought to you by Genesis Fertilizer. Farmers of Western Canada, your future is in your hands. With volatile markets and rising costs, now's your chance to be part of the solution. Gain control, safeguard your farm, and ensure access to locally produced nitrogen. Farmers like you are joining the ownership group to take control of their fertilizer supply and protect their bottom line. Visit genesisfertilizer.com for more information. Any investment in Genesis Fertilizer LP is for accredited investors only and is subject to suitability review by a registered securities dealer. See you in the episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Impact Farming Show. Today, we have a great returning guest. We have Heather Venenga. How are you?
Great. It's so good to be back again.
I am so excited to have you back and continue our conversation about transition planning. So those of you that caught Heather the last time, you will have loved the episode. I had great feedback. If you didn't, you might want to watch that one after these two that we're doing today. So Heather is the owner of American Harvest Financial, a financial advisor from Watertown, South Dakota, and the author of this phenomenal book.
You're
Yay!
so kind.
Yeah. And that is what we did the episode about last time. I was just so pumped to find your book on Amazon, and I invited you on, and we worked our way through the book and talked a little bit about why and all that good stuff. So that's a great episode, guys. This conversation, we're diving into two parts of transition planning and two parts that Heather mentions in the book. So before we get into our episode, Heather, can you tell our audience a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so like she said, I'm Heather Venenga. I live in Watertown, South Dakota. We moved home about 10 years ago so my husband could take over the family farm. And prior to that, I had worked in corporate America, and so became a financial advisor when we moved here. And I am very passionate about farm succession planning because we had really good luck with ours. It wasn't perfect, but it was very good. And as I met farm families and was working with them in my financial practice, I realized that they were really struggling and they needed help, they needed direction, they needed a system. And they just didn't know, nobody was giving them the right information and kind of guiding them through it. And so I really worked hard to put a process together and worked with a lot of really good attorneys that understand farm succession planning and some farm mediators, and just got really good at what I do. And now I'm lucky enough to work with farm families all over the United States and be able to do lots of speaking events and just help people out to learn everything they can about farm succession planning. So yeah.
I love it. We are on a mutual journey. You know the succession planning world just as well as I do. We see sometimes and hear when it goes bad more often than we do the good situations. But I think more than anything, people are struggling to know the steps. Right, Heather? I mean, we usually do this once, if maybe twice in our farming career. There's no real roadmap, and everybody's farm is so different. And actually what I found the last couple years, I haven't found many books on this. And what I love, and I'm going to get you to share a little bit about your book too, just to set the stage for our conversation. But what I love about books are our episodes here are great. Podcasts are great. YouTube channels are great. Written articles are great, but they're piecemeal, right?
Yeah.
And it's hard to paint a big connected story. And that is what I love about books. And when I found your book, I'm like, oh my gosh. And it's so easy to read and it's fun. So on that note, do you want to speak about your book a little bit? I want you to give a plug and tell our audience all about it.
It was a ton of fun to write. It's a parable. So half of it's like a wolf story, and there's a little bit of humor in there because not everything has to be so serious. So it's about wolves that are doing farm succession planning, which I know is crazy. So we see them kind of go through that process. And then in every chapter after that, there is facts, things you need to know, steps, like what we learned from the wolf story, things that you can put into practice. And then the last section of every chapter is action steps, like exactly things to think about, questions to ask, what to do. So yeah, and it just goes through the whole process, beginning to end. So
Nice. And you know what I like about the fact that you made it into a parable is it's fun. And to
yeah,
me, it takes a lot of the pressure and intensity off, and maybe even the finger pointing,
yeah,
where if you put it in the traditional roles, farm mom, farm dad,
yeah,
kids fighting, this is such a heated topic
right.
that I think if you, and it's okay, the books are written the other way, but I think if you were to try and read this and share this with a family member and it's the traditional roles, it might be a little like finger pointing, where it's
Yeah,
like, listen to this funny story about this wolf family. And then
right.
it's easy to give it to your parents. And I find it just kind of takes that personal
Yeah.
maybe finger pointing off a little bit.
Mhm.
That's so helpful for this type of situation, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to do. Like you can step back and laugh about some of the things they say to each other, or or they run into these pigs that know it all, or those kind of things, just funny stuff. And you can just say, yeah, that is like the neighbors, like, so yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then we have the neighbors and Fancy Wolf. And oh, I loved it. And you know what? It's just fun to read too, where a lot of this stuff would be like an estate plan and it could get pretty boring,
Yeah.
right? Where here it's quick, it's precise, it's a great overview. And for people that are struggling and like chasing their tail around,
Yeah.
which I find
Yeah.
is the feeling
Yeah.
between power dynamics and personal relationships and just
Yeah.
not knowing what to do. Like this is a great like, oh, okay. Let's take a step, right?
Great. Yeah.
Last
Cool.
night, as I was preparing for our conversation today, I was rereading the parts about wills and trusts, guys.
Uh-huh.
That's what we're going to talk about today. One episode about wills and trusts, and then we're going to break it up and do one about fair and equal. So,
Yep.
as I was brushing up on those sections of the book, it was funny. The neighbor, Mama Piggy, came over to learn about what Mama Wolf learned about
Yeah.
about fair and equal because
Yeah.
Mama Piggy has 10 piglets and she's concerned how to switch or how to split the farm up. So,
Right.
as much as there is humor, one might go, well, that doesn't sound very serious. But it gets to the point and it conveys everything. So it was just brilliant. And then I was re-immersed again. Anyways, longest intro I've ever done to an episode, Heather. But
Here we are.
yeah, here we are. Here we are. Best conversation. So, okay, that is who you are, what you do. We spoke about the book. Why don't
Yeah.
we start with wills and trusts first? So, do you
Okay.
want to share what each of those are and
Yep.
maybe the difference between the two to start?
Yeah, yeah, you bet. So when people come to one of my workshops or get on my YouTube channel or even read the book, one of the biggest things they want to know is what's the difference between a will and a trust. And they think all the solutions are in that answer, right? Like if I just knew the difference between that and what I needed, then I would have my whole plan in place. And so wills and trusts are one part of the overall plan, and we need to know where we're going. I call it a management plan, right? The whole estate management plan. We need to know where we're going before we get to, do we need a will or a trust? And so we definitely need to know information about it, but it's one piece of it. So don't feel like if you know this, you know it all. Like, because that's, I think, why people struggle. They're like, if I just knew that, then I would know. Nope, you don't know because you don't know the whole thing. So,
Yeah.
but wills and trusts, just to give you a little basic information about them. A will go through probate.
Okay.
And remember, I'm from the United States, so South Dakota. So if you're somewhere else, like you fact check me there, wherever you're at. And then state to state is also different. But wills will go through probate. And in the United States, the average probate cost is 8% of your total gross assets. So if we take everybody that goes through probate in the United States and total gross assets, 8% is going to probate costs, which is mostly attorney costs. So that's a lot. It's very, very high. And so we think we're doing the easy thing with a will because wills are short, they're easy to write. The thing about a will is it does go to the court, right? And they're the ones that carry it out. A will, it doesn't hold assets. It's just one and done. And the court's the ones that kind of determine, interpret what's going on with the will. Now, a lot of times people come in and they're like, well, I don't know, like that doesn't sound right because maybe my uncle passed away and the probate was really easy. And I'm like, well, did you have to get an attorney? Yep. Did your uncle have a lot of assets? Nope, just a house and, maybe a little bit of money in the bank. And I said, well, that's not how it works for farms because we have a lot of assets with farms. And so it's not simple. It can't be simple like a simple will. If somebody doesn't have a lot of assets, they just want to have them all sold and split between whoever, like a will might be okay, right? But it wouldn't be with a farm most of the time because farms have a lot going on. And so the opposite or the other option, so you have a will or you have a trust. And a trust, I've heard it explained, and I hate the saying, but I'm going to use it because it works good. It's like instructions from the grave. It wraps around your assets and it tells the executor or the trustee of your estate what to do.
Hey, it's me. If you're enjoying this episode, like it and subscribe. We are here to bring you the people and ideas that'll impact your farming operation. And I would love to have you each week on this journey. Subscribe, and I'll see you back in the episode.
And so you can put whatever you want to in a trust. And the land can stay in a trust. It can come out of a trust. You could say that family can buy it at X amount below market value. You can't do too deep a dives, but you can do a little bit there. You could say only family members can buy it. Like you can put in there whatever you want. You get a pick. So sometimes people come in and they're like, and there's nothing wrong with it, right? Like they'll say, like, I just wanted to go to my kids and not the stepkids. I'm like, that's fine. Put it in the trust. Those are the kind you need instructions from the grave that say exactly what you want to have happen. And that's how a trust works. And so definitely more complicated, a lot more going on with it. There's options to establish, and I can't get into the detail of it, but like if you need to establish for tax purposes, like you want to make sure that you capture as much of your inheritance tax that you can, like you can do that with a trust. You can't do that with a will. And so it can drop into a different trust, all sorts of things. And so trusts, some people will come to me and they'll be like, I don't want to trust. My neighbor had a trust and it didn't work well for them, and I kind of laugh about that in the book. We talk about the neighbors, what happens with the neighbors, right? But just because it didn't work with them didn't mean it didn't work with you. And sometimes maybe the trust wasn't written well. Maybe they just didn't like what was in the trust, but maybe that's exactly what the decision makers wanted to have happen. And so don't judge it based on what's going on around you and what you're told. You really need to work with a good attorney and a good overall team to make sure you've got the right thing in place. And so with trust, there's revocable and irrevocable, very different. So revocable can be changed. Irrevocable, for the most part, cannot. Now, I've seen a few of them broken, but it's very, very difficult. And so revocable trust can be changed. It's what most of my families land on. You get that. It's your instructions. When something happens, it goes into place. Irrevocable, unless you know exactly what you want to have happen and you're not going to change your mind. Maybe you're not an active farm anymore. You just have land you want passed on. Then irrevocable might work okay. The time I see irrevocable work well is if maybe the decision makers can make the decision together, and then usually the dad passes away first. It's kind of nice if it drops into an irrevocable trust at that point, because then mom's not left to make any decisions herself, because it's like, nope, we made the decision and it's done. And the reason is I see the bad stories, and sometimes, mom will live till she's 90 or 100. By that time, the kids are old enough. They're starting to maybe get dementia or think differently. And then they're pressuring mom to make a change. And it gets into this whole battle. And because things look different when we're older. And so if we make those decisions when we're younger, it's a lot better. So yeah, so that's a little bit about those. So
I like it. And I'm glad you made the point about you being in the US. I was going to make that note, and I'm glad you did. We have Canadian listeners, US, probably, around the world. So to me, some of these subjects as a 101 are perfect, right? These are giving the grain, the nugget of the idea, but the disclaimer, like you said, is seek legal advice and then go through that with the lawyer to your case. So anyways, I want to throw that in there too. So people are like, Tracy told me this and it's wrong.
Depends on what state you're in, depends on what country you're in. So for sure. Yep.
Okay, perfect. So that's an excellent run through of wills versus trust. And in the book, you said a third option is passing the farm on with corporation and shares. Do you want to touch on that?
Ah, yes. So some people come into me and they're like, Heather, I got it figured out. I'm like, okay, tell me what you're going to do. We're already a corporation. I'm going to start giving them shares. And then when I pass away, my shares are going to be divided between my kids. And so then they're going to jointly own the farm. It is the most highly litigated situation in the United States. Super highly litigated because you're forcing business partnerships. And it's hard to find a good business partner when you get to pick them. And now you are being forced to have a partner. And so sometimes it's even like maybe stepmom or, stepmom and the kids, or it's just siblings, and then they're married, and then maybe they pass away, and then it goes to their kids, and it just splinters. And whoever's trying to really run that farm really struggles because they've got other people that aren't on the farm. They don't understand. And so one of the cases I refer to, if you like to read case law, is in Lincoln, Nebraska. And it was 2014, and it was 4 siblings, and they inherited it through a corporation. So the boys farmed together. And of course, when I say boys, they're, probably 50 or 60, but they farm together and they get 80% of the farm. And then the girls got the 20%. And so the boys could outvote the girls all the time. And they did. And one year they paid themselves in the amount of 400,000 in commodities. And that made the girls mad. So the girls legaled up and sued their brothers. And that's what we want to avoid. And so you don't want your kids suing each other. And the girls lost, by the way. But it brings up the point, make as many decisions as you can. And if you are just passing it on as shares, you're not making the decision. You're just kicking it forward for them to try to tough it out later and figure out how to buy the other one out. Like, that's all you're doing. And so make the decisions you can. Now, once in a while, there is a time it works. I worked with a dairy farm, like they were really, really big, 40 million plus. And they had 4 siblings and their spouses. So there's eight kind of relatives, right? That all worked together. They had job descriptions. They had an HR director, which was one of the kids. They had staff meetings. They had a way you could get in. If you were that next generation, they would fire you. They had fired family members. Like, they had processes. It ran like a corporation. Now, by all means, keep it a corporation. That's going to work for you in that situation. Keep running with it. But that's not the average farm. They're usually smaller. We don't usually have job descriptions. That just is a normal, it's not the average one. So their case, it worked great. Most cases, it really, really doesn't. And it's just like, if you think that's the way to go, look up case law. Just start reading case law on it. It'll make you sick. Like, it always is fights and a lot of litigation. Yeah.
And I've touched on this previous in a few episodes that I just did. I'm just trying to get to the bottom for our audience. There's so much out there, and somebody's saying, do this, somebody's saying this.
Yeah.
Like, okay, let's have all these conversations and look at everything, good, bad, and ugly. But if you look at that option, okay, let's put it there. Maybe it makes sense for whatever reason, but just looking at human nature, okay, family roles. So do those siblings get along with to begin, right?
Yeah.
To begin with. If not, well, it's going to be a problem. Number 2, the conflict of interest. The ones that don't farm, if they really love the farm and they want to keep it going, then there might be some desire. But think of it, if they're not connected to the farm and there's no real strong feeling, and they're like, well, my siblings are all sitting on all these millions.
Yeah, they see a dollar amount that's not liquid.
They see dollar. There's an obvious conflict of interest where they're like, why don't we sell this? Why don't we cash out? And then there's going to be resentment, wouldn't there be?
Yeah, it's huge. And the thing is, kids will tell you one thing, like what you want to hear, even when they're adults, because they love you and you're their parents. And then when the parents are gone, it's a whole new ballgame. And also, people get older. I mean, things look different when you're 70 than when you're 50. And so it just, they're partners for life after that. And and then their kids too, like, what are they going to do with that? Eventually somebody's going to have to buy somebody out, or they're going to have to sell. There's no other way that's going to end. And so, yeah. And it's tough because you're right. There's different opinions like out there. And as you talk to different professionals, you're going to hear different stories. And I was meeting with some women at an egg conference the other day, and somebody spoke up and she said, I was at a presentation the other day that said just the opposite of what you said. They said it's a good way to do it. And I said, okay, I appreciate that. Like I appreciate the honesty about that. Let's step back and you think about your family and who's in it and what that looks like now, and then what it could look like, down the road, and then get in, look at case law. And when you look at all that, you have to have some critical thinking, especially, and that's what's tough, I think now. It used to be even 10 years ago, there wasn't much information out there about farm succession planning. Now there's a lot. And so people have to have critical thinking and step back and say, like, what do I need to do here? Like, what is she telling me? And I also tell people, we talk about having a team in place, which is a CPA, an attorney, and a good advisor. And you always have to step back and say, okay, why are they saying that? Like I had a family that came in and they had been through a process, not with me, but another advisor and an attorney, and they had went through the whole thing. They felt like the advisor had done a great job. They went and sat in front of the attorney, and the attorney told them something totally different.
Oh.
And then they came to me and they're like, what does all this mean? Like they were super frustrated, and there was a ton of conflict there. And so that was super unfortunate. And so then I stepped back with them and said, okay, well, let's think about this. Like, why did you decide this with the advisor? And then why do you think the attorney said this? And where are they coming from? And it just depends on what they're used to, unfortunately. And there's a lot of people that dabble and aren't specialists. And so you run into somebody that dabbles with estate planning and they don't specialize in farms, and the tools they have in their toolbox are not adequate. And that can be with all those professionals. All three of them can do that. So then they tell you to do whatever they know how to do. And that's not good. So you absolutely have to have the right team in place, and they have to be people that understand farm succession planning. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I have, and I may have mentioned this last time, I've been doing this for 7 years, and this is a farm business management, ideas that impact farmers. I started the show because of succession planning, personal experience, and then I didn't feel ready, able, whatever the case was, to really do this deep dive. Now I'm like, I am so tired of families being destroyed, nobody knowing what to do. I'm putting it all in my episodes here. And also, these are hard conversations, and I kind of see all the angles, and I'm just saying the ugly stuff, the unpopular stuff, because most people will be like, oh, do that. That makes sense legally. It's like, yeah, people weren't involved, and maybe it was pigs and they can't speak, right? Yeah. But I'm just tired of, and no bad. I mean, there's brilliant people in this industry, but it's like, let's put it all on the table and let's figure this out. That's my right. And just like you said, you go to this person, they say this because that's what they know.
That's what they know. Mm-hmm.
Let's look at all the tools. So, I'm going to put a disclaimer here. We're doing a part 2 to this. If you guys are watching, this will really go into fair and equal. So it'll be this conversation, but deeper right away. So tune into that episode next, guys. And then we'll get to the nitty gritty of it and hopefully more answers. So, okay. Wills, trust, third option is corporation with shares.
Yep.
We'll leave that there. I think that's a great overview. I just want to wrap the episode up with biggest mistakes farmers make around wills and trusts. If you have anything to add, you kind of touched already. And then words of wisdom to farmers about wills and trusts, wherever you want to take those to.
Yeah. Use critical thinking for sure. So you have to make sure you have a good attorney, a good CPA, and a good advisor that are on your side and understand farm succession planning. And if one of them's not working, then find another one that will work on that team. That is really, really critical. And interview them. Like, ask your financial advisor how they get paid. Ask your attorney how much of their practice revenue comes in from probate versus trust writing. If you have somebody, the bulk of their practice is making money off of probate, what are they going to do? They're going to put you in a will. I hate to say it, but it's true. If you have a financial advisor and they get paid from selling life insurance and not a fee to help you, they're going to sell you life insurance in order to get paid, right? And so you really have to ask those really, really hard questions to all professionals, like all of them. So for sure. Yeah.
I love that you're saying that stuff too, because that's what needs to be said. You know, as I mentioned before, we only do this once or twice, and we're not necessarily in as farmers in that sales world, business world where you, and farmers are brilliant. Don't get me wrong, negotiate lots of business, lots of money. But if you're not dealing with lawyers and accountants and that world all the time, that's intimidating. It's kind of like, oh, maybe a little bit. And I remember when I was like this, oh, lawyer, you're God, you know everything. And then you get going, you deal with an accountant, they tell you this, and it's like, my critical thinking is saying, I appreciate what you're saying, but that ain't right for me in this situation. Right?
Exactly.
So I love the nitty gritty and just having these unpopular but needed conversations. It doesn't help anybody if we're just like, oh, it's all good and everything's in your best interests, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
For sure.
Heather, you're brilliant. I love having you on. You should be a weekly guest. That would be my whole show.
Eventually.
That would be my whole show. Okay, once a month then. Okay. Well, and again, guys, I'll do, as we wrap this episode up and then go into part 2, which is going to be Fair and Equal, I'll do one last call out for the book because, again, it's so beautiful, easy to read. It just helps you connect with the ideas. And then Heather in there shares more about the team, wills and trusts, processes, like you said, action items. So grab a copy. It's on Amazon, as far as I know, right? It's still on there.
It's on Amazon. It's on Amazon. Yep.
Okay, Heather, thank you for wills and trusts, and I will see you back for Fair and Equal. Heather, you are a gem. Thank you for joining me again. Thank you for putting this work together. I know it wasn't easy, but so valuable. So thank you, Heather. I appreciate
you having me again. I just am so passionate about sharing, solutions and just helping one farm at a time. That's what we got to do. So
I love it. It is my pleasure to have you on the show again. You guys in the audience, if you like this as much as I did, like it, share it, get it out there. Honestly, every farmer needs to hear this episode, watch this episode, and buy this book. So see you guys next week. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Impact Farming. For more great episodes and articles designed to help you manage and grow your farming operation, head on over to farmmarketer.com. Don't forget to sign up while you're there. We will see you on the next episode.